Bigfoot is said to be a large, ape-like creature that lives primarily in the forests stretching from northern California to the west coast of British Columbia and to a lesser extent throughout North America. Bigfoot is a cryptid, a creature whose existence is suggested but has not yet been confirmed by the scientific community. Bigfoot is rooted in indigenous legend and is commonly researched by cryptozoologists and enthusiasts. Some believe the creature is a nearly extinct species of hominid that survives in isolation, while others consider the creature to be the product of folklore or a hoax. There has been much information gained on Bigfoot through the testimonials of those who have witnessed the creature. The average height of a Bigfoot is reported to be anywhere from 6 feet to 10 feet tall or more. Its weight can be anywhere from 400 to 800 pounds. Footprints range from 12 inches up to 18 inches long or more, with a length of 6 to 8 inches in width. Palm of hands are described as a 6 to 8 inch width. Hair is usually auburn, brown, black, gray, or white. Skin color can be black, brown, or tan. Head is reported as a sagittal crest. Facial features are described as a large brow ridge, flat, wide nose, and long, thin, human-like lips. Eyes are usually black, brown, or red. Their odor is sometimes described as similar to a wet-smelling dog, a skunk, or rotting meat. In Philippine folklore, the Amomongo is a creature described as hairy, man-sized, and ape-like, with long nails. The term may have its roots in the Hiligaynon word amo, which means ape or monkey. Residents of La Castellana in Negros Occidental refer to the creature as a wild monkey that lives in caves near the foot of Mount Canleon. The creature is said to have attacked 2 residents of the settlement and disemboweled goats and chickens in the area for the purpose of eating the entrails. In Russian folklore, the Chichunya is an entity said to dwell in Siberia. It has been described as human-like, covered with dark hair, 6 to 7 feet tall with broad shoulders, a large protruding brow, and long matted hair. In 1928, the Soviets sent out an expedition team to gather information about the Chichunya near the Indigirka and Yana rivers. There, they claimed to have found that the Chichunya were remarkably similar to the Almas. According to the native accounts from the nomadic Yakut and Tungus tribes, it is a well-built Neanderthal-like man wearing pelts as clothes. It is said to occasionally consume human flesh, unlike their close cryptid cousins, the Almas. Researchers believe that these beings may possibly be a part of what some have speculated are a relic population of Paleo-Asiatic Aborigines, or possibly even Neanderthals. The name Ben Manouche means ape man in Indo-Aryan. It is a type of Bigfoot which has been spotted in Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. Measuring around 6 feet tall, it is said to be one of the more aggressive Bigfoot-type creatures, known for occasionally kidnapping humans. It is said to be very closely linked to the legendary abominable snowman in South Asia. The name Ben Manoush is very similar to another Bangladesh cryptid named Mande Barong. The Nukluk, also known as man of the bush, is a cryptozoological hominid said to dwell in the Nahanni National Park Reserve, Northwest Territories, Canada, between April and June 1964 by John Baptist, several men, and a boy named Jerry. Several Dene Indians from Fort Liard, who were trapping at a river, reportedly came upon the creature in April 1964. It looked around 5 feet tall, very strong, and appeared to have a long, dark beard and wore no clothes. In June 1964, near Fort Simpson, around 9 p.m., a boy named Jerry reported a similar creature. It had black hair on its head, upper body, and legs. Its head was slightly pointed at the back. It also had a long brown beard that reached its waist. It wore ankle-high boots, a moose skin loincloth, and had a stone club in its hand. These creatures have been reported for hundreds of years and are said to have boot-like footprints and make whistling calls. They have been reported from the Northwest Territories, from the Yukon to the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska. North American Bigfoot reports have been published in newspapers all over the United States for over 150 years. They were common, accepted, and most often made headline news. Bigfoot back then was referred to as a wild man that was around 6 to 10 feet tall and covered with hair from head to foot. Reports state that the wild man was not only tall, but also possessed an extreme muscular physique, which could run and jump just as swiftly as a deer to evade capture. Most sighting reports back then were centered around cattle, farm animals, and crops, which are a farmer's livelihood and a staple in producing community food. So any reports of missing or mutilated farm animals involving the wild man were taken serious and published in newspapers as to inform everyone in advance of an impending or possible danger, problem, or other unpleasant situation involving an unknown creature. These wild man articles that were published over 100 years ago were not laughed at and considered entertainment like most present-day Bigfoot articles. Most communities back then were close-knit and communicated with one another in matters of survival and safety. Nowadays, our overpopulated communities are disconnected and receive much of their information from government and media organizations operating for a religious, educational, or social purpose, with the aim of gaining and maintaining sovereignty over the citizens. These controlled institutions are mainly service to self and wholly deny the existence of the being we call Bigfoot. If an official discovery of the North American primate would occur, it would usher in a costly new paradigm in the understanding of human evolution that would rewrite the history books, challenge our religious beliefs, and reprogram the way society thinks and reacts to Bigfoot. Bigfoot would then be considered an endangered species, and parts of the Pacific Northwest forests would become a protected environment, a sanctuary for the nomadic species. This, in return, would shut down the logging industries in the protected areas, thus creating a loss of jobs, resources, and income. A type of social awakening such as this would create a tremendous domino effect of questions in regards to our previously accepted understanding of reality taught by global institutions. Other similar subjects previously scoffed at by mainstream society, such as ufology, extraterrestrials, and cryptozoology, would now be seen as areas of knowledge and subjects of discussion or thought. A news article printed in the Newcastle News on December 20th, 1875, describes a detailed account of a Bigfoot encounter in Neshannock Township, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. The article focuses on a letter submitted to the newspaper company. The article reads, "On Monday, December 20th, a singular adventure happened to me which has ever since been so painfully on my mind that I have resolved to give it to your paper for publication. Early on the morning of the day named above, accompanied by a small dog, I started to visit a number of muskrat traps which I have set along the banks of the Neshannock, some distance below the Reynolds Mill. I was making my way through the underbrush near the creek when my attention was attracted by an unusual-looking footprint embedded in the snow. It was very broad, some 13 inches in length, and was different than anything I have ever seen before. It had 5 toes, the first being spread out from the others, giving the track the appearance of having been made by a gigantic hand with the thumb extended. This discovery startled me very much, and it also greatly affected the dog, as he ran around among the underbrush, howling all the while. I had gotten a short distance from the spot where I have discovered the footprints when my ears were saluted with the most terrible roar I have ever heard in my life. The bushes were parted about 30 yards in front of me, and the most singular-looking man that I have ever beheld appeared to view. He was covered all over in grayish-colored hair, with the exception of his face and breast, the latter being covered with dark parchment-like skin. His height was about 6 feet. His arms had a spread of nearly 7 feet and seemed like cables of twisted wire, so muscular-looking were they. His chest must have measured 7 feet around, and he was all in all the personification of Herculean strength. To my inexpressible horror, he advanced rapidly toward me, beating his breasts with his muscular arms, producing a sound like the drumming of a pheasant on a hollow log, but much louder and deeper. When he had approached within a distance of 20 feet, I could plainly discern the lineaments on his horrible features. His ferocious face was very black and was ornamented with large teeth which protruded from an immense mouth like the tusks of a wild boar. His countenance was distorted with rage. His huge teeth ground against each other so I could plainly hear the sound. The skin of his forehead was drawn forward and backward rapidly, which made his hair move up and down and gave a truly devilish expression to his face. Once more he gave out a roar which seemed to shake the woods like thunder. I could feel the earth tremble under my feet. The monster was looking at me in the eyes, advancing rapidly and beating his breasts. I was spellbound and paralyzed, and had it not been for a fortunate intervention, I should have been undoubtedly crushed in his long arms. The little dog that was with me darted forward and sunk his teeth into one of the lower limbs of the wild man and drew his attention from me. He stooped down, grabbed the dog by the hind legs, and with both of his hands, he whirled him with lightning-like rapidity around his head a half a dozen times, loosened his grip, and the poor animal, with a piteous yelp, went through the air like a rocket for 30 yards, striking head foremost against a large sycamore tree, and then fell to the ground dead, crushed into a jelly-like pulp. Overcome with horror, I lost all consciousness. When I came to myself about 2 hours afterward, the wild man was gone. I have been confined to my bed ever since from the effects of the adventure, and I am unable to be around. But soon as I recover, my sons and myself intend, with guns and with dogs, taking a hunt for the wild man, and we may have something to further report, as we are determined to capture him if possible. The whole of Neshannock Township is greatly excited over the matter, as there is scarcely a night passes that corn, chickens, and other farm products are taken, and no clue left as to the perpetrator except for an unusual-looking footprint of immense size in the snow. Yours truly, John Nemo. In 1901, a lumberman named Mike King had a Bigfoot encounter which was featured in the Daily British Colonist. The witness was working alone on Vancouver Island near the Campbell River. His Native American packers refused to accompany him because of their fear of the monkey men, who were said to live in the forest. In the late afternoon, King observed a man-beast washing roots in the river. When the creature eventually noticed him, it cried out and ran up a nearby hill. King described the creature as being covered with reddish-brown hair and having unusually long arms, which it excessively used when climbing and running through the bush. The creature's trail showed a distinct human foot, but with unusually long and spreading toes. 3 years later, in December 1904, the Daily British Colonist featured another Bigfoot story, this time from 4 credible witnesses who saw a man-like creature on Vancouver Island. In 1907, the newspaper told the story of yet another encounter with the creature, involving the abandonment of an Indian village due to the inhabitants being frightened away by a monkey-like wild man who appeared on the beach at night and howls in an unearthly fashion. Nevada State Journal reported on Saturday, January 4th, 1964, that an ape-faced 10-foot man was sighted in the Sierra snow. The article states, Pinecrest, California. A pilot flying a small plane near this tiny resort community recently said he saw what appeared to be a 10-foot man with an ape-like face standing in the snow watching the plane fly over. The pilot reported the incident, which supposedly happened in the back country near Pinecrest, to the sheriff's office in Sonora, but deputies there would not release his name or elaborate on the report. A broadcaster from a radio station in Sonora said Friday he talked to a sheriff's deputy stationed in Pinecrest, and the deputy, Albert Miller, said he had been called out to the Pinecrest City dump late last week to investigate a set of huge footprints found in the snow. Miller said the footprints were very large and about 6 feet apart. The deputy said they were definitely not bear tracks. Approximately a year ago, residents of the Pinecrest area reported hearing hideous screams coming from the woods near their homes and told of seeing a gigantic man running through the forest in the early evenings. About a month after the reports of the screaming, a veteran backwoods pilot and a Pacific Gas and Electric employee on a snow survey near Pinecrest said they saw the creature standing in some bushes in the wilderness. When they flew in at a low level to take a photograph, they said it ran into the woods. The two men established the creature to be about 4 feet taller than the foliage it was standing in, and they landed and measured them. The bushes were 6 feet tall. Sheriff Miller Sardella of Sonora said Friday he has no intentions of sending deputies into the backwoods to search for the supposed monster. If and when he breaks the law, we'll go after him then. As long as he doesn't do anything wrong, we'll leave him alone, Sardella said. On August 23, 1895, an article appeared in the North Adams Daily Transcript, Friday afternoon edition. Headline reads, "Built like a horse. Wild man creates terror among farmers around Indian Meadow. He scares brutes as well as human beings. Posse organized and make a determined effort at capture." The article reads, Winston, Connecticut. The wild man was seen again yesterday by passengers on Dodd stagecoach en route to Winsted from Sandusfield, Massachusetts. He was in the same tract of brush as when seen last Saturday by Selectman Smith, which is 5 miles from here on the old and lonesome highway leading to Colebrook. The wild man lives in Indian Meadow, as it's known to the countrymen. He is thought to be one of a family of 3 wild men seen 2 years ago. The man seen had no clothes and was covered with hair. The wild man seen in Canaan Mountain, New Hampshire, a few months ago is thought to be the same person. Farmers in that section are terrorized and afraid to go outdoors after dark. The mysterious disappearance of calves and lambs are blamed upon the wild man. 500 men leave Sunday morning to hunt for the strange character. Every man of the posse is warned to go armed. On Saturday, Riley Smith, while coming over the road, stopped to pick a few berries, but no sooner as he commenced to eat than the wild man emerged from the center of a patch of berry bushes. Smith was scared to death. His dog commenced to whine with its tail between its legs and sought refuge in Smith's wagon under a pile of blankets. The wild man was described as an awful-looking sight. He is large in stature, and his head is the most conspicuous part of his body, being nearly the size of a horse's head. His teeth resemble those of a horse in size, but are pointed. His hands are extra large. On Saturday, July 27th, 1895, in Middletown, New York, a news article appeared in the Middletown Daily Argus. Headline reads, "Delaware County Wild Man eats horses, described as a giant and of hairy appearance, reign of terror." One night recently, as Peter Thomas was driving along a lonely road, he was startled by seeing a wild-eyed man or ape whose ferocious appearance frightened him into a state of helplessness. The creature jumped into the road, seized the rear horse with a single sweep of its long hairy arm, tore the harness from the trembling beast. After breaking the horse's neck with a single deft twist, dragged him into the woods, out of sight. Saturday, the excitement was still further increased by the discovery of what had evidently been the camp of the creature. It was run upon by a party of berry pickers in the woods near Rattlesnake Hill. Nearby was a portion of the carcass of Mr. Thomas's horse, and scattered about were the bones and remains of several cow, sheep, and other animals. The party left in a sudden haste. Those who have seen this fearful creature agree in only one thing: they would not face the thing for all the wealth of the Vanderbilts. A panic has seized the farmers and lumbermen of that region, while the more courageous are organizing parties to hunt the creature down. The more timid are leaving the neighborhood. On Friday, May 5th, 1871, the Hagerstown Mail in Hagerstown, Maryland, published a report that involved encounters with what was then called the Tennessee Wild Man. The article reads, "Jackson, Tennessee. We learn that between Sabi and Cranesville, on what is called Piney in McNair County, a strange and frightful being has been observed for several weeks. He is said to be 7 feet tall and possess great muscular power. His eyes are unusually large and fiery red. His hair hangs in a tangled and matted mass of jet below his waist, and his beard reaches below his middle. His entire body is covered with hair, and his whole aspect is most frightful. He shuns the sight of men, but approaches with wild and horrid screams of delight every woman who is unaccompanied by a man. He sometimes, with great caution, approaches houses, and should he see a man, he runs away with astonishing swiftness, leaping the tallest fences with the ease of a deer, defying alike the pursuit of men and dogs. He has frightened several women by attempting to carry them off, as well as by his horrid aspect, and the whole country around Sabi is in consternation. The citizens are now scouring the woods and are determined to either capture or drive off the monster." The Brainerd Daily Dispatch in Brainerd, Minnesota, on Tuesday, July 10th, 1934, reported that reports that survivors of the tribe of wild men known as Sasquatch, a race of ferocious hairy giants who dwelt in caves in British Columbia years ago, still are roaming the rocky wilds near Vancouver. The tribe was believed to have become extinct 30 years ago, but during the last year, it frequently has been reported that survivors have been seen prowling near the scattered settlements around Vancouver. The wild men are described as hairy giants, 9 feet tall, with a ferocious appearance and demeanor. Seen by a woman, Miss James Caulfield, living on a farm near Harrison, British Columbia, is the latest to report seeing one of the giants. Miss Caulfield relates that she was washing clothes in a river when she heard a buzzing sound similar to that made by a hummingbird. I turned my head, she said, but instead of a bird, there stood the most terrible thing I ever saw in my life. I thought I would die, for the thing that made that funny noise was a big man covered with hair from head to toe. He was looking at me, and I couldn't help looking at him. I guessed he was a sasquatch, so I covered my eyes with my hand. For the Indians say that if a sasquatch catches your eye, you are in his power. They hypnotize you. I felt faint, and as I backed away to get to the house, I tripped and fell. As he came nearer, I screamed and fainted. Miss Caulfield's screams brought her husband running out of the house just in time to see the giant run off into the bush. On another occasion, 2 canoeists reported that the giant saw them paddling down a river and started to hurl rocks at them. The Grand Traverse Herald in Traverse City, Michigan, published a report of an incident on Friday, December 17, 1858, involving what was then called wild people in Pennsylvania. The story reads, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a thing like a man, but as hairy as a bear, has been seen by the people. It was very wild and strong. It was once seen in a pen, sucking the cows, and when discovered, it started as if about to fight, and then turned and fled, bounding like a deer. It walks upright, and it is supposed to be a wild man. On July 3rd, 1884, an article appeared in the Daily Colonist newspaper entitled, "A Strange Creature Captured Above Yale, a British Columbia Gorilla." In the immediate vicinity of No. 4 train tunnel, situated some 20 miles above this village, are bluffs of rock which are unsurmountable, but on Monday morning they were successfully scaled by Mr. Onderdonk's employees on the regular train from Lytton. Assisted by Mr. Costerton, the British Columbia Express Company's messenger, and a number of gentlemen from Lytton and points east of that place who, after considerable trouble and perilous climbing, succeeded in capturing a creature which may truly be called half man, half beast. Jacko, as the creature has been called by his captorers, is something of a gorilla type, standing 4 feet 7 inches in height and weighing 127 pounds. He has long, black, strong hair and resembles a human being with one exception. His entire body, except his hands and feet, are covered with glossy hair about 1 inch long. His forearm is much longer than a man's forearm, and he possesses extraordinary strength, as he will take hold of a stick and break it by wrenching or twisting it, which no living man could break in the same way. During his capture, he was very reticent, only occasionally uttering a noise which is a half bark and a half growl. He is, however, becoming daily more attached to his keeper, Mr. George Talberry, who proposes shortly, starting in London, England, to exhibit him. His favorite food so far is berries, and he drinks fresh milk with evident relish. By advice of Dr. Hannington, raw meats have been withheld from Jacko, as the doctor thinks it would have a tendency to make him savage. Peter Byrne was a world-renowned researcher who spent most of his life investigating and searching for the Himalayan yeti and the Bigfoot of the Pacific Northwest. He was born in Dublin, Ireland on August 22, 1925. He graduated school and joined the Royal British Air Force during World War II. After his service, he came to work on a tea plantation in northern India in the late 1940s. Being a successful big game hunter, he opened Nepal's first tiger hunting concession and eventually found himself face to face with stories about the abominable snowman, or yeti. He found his first yeti print in 1948 in Sikkim, northeast India. Peter Byron has lived a long and dedicated life in pursuit of cryptozoological subjects such as the yeti, and has achieved what very few could have ever imagined. He was able to acquire sponsorships for his Bigfoot research for almost 6 decades. He had headed a rather successful search for the yeti in 1957, 1958, and 1959, which was funded by a Texas oil man who went by the name of Tom Slick. Hearing of the discovery of more Bigfoot prints in Northern California in 1959, Tom Slick asked Byron and Peter's brother, Brian, to head up a Pacific Northwest Bigfoot expedition in 1960. For a short time, this hunt included Rene DeHinden, John Green, and Bob Titmus. After Slick's death in 1962, the operations shut down in the Pacific Northwest. Byron returned to the Bigfoot scene in 1971 with funding by an Ohio millionaire named Tom Page. At that time, Byron worked with Dennis Jensen. Eventually, Tom Page departed ways with Byron and Jensen. Byron could not continue his efforts until a few years later, in the early 1970s, when the Boston Academy of Applied Sciences began sponsoring Byron, who promoted a no-kill position, and established a Bigfoot Information Center near the Dalles, Oregon. In 1976, Peter Byron wrote The Search for Bigfoot, Monster, Myth, or Man. His Oregon effort continued for 9 years, from 1970 to 1979. Byron would make a career out of appearing regularly in television documentaries about Bigfoot. During that time, Byron appeared on In Search Of, and also in the short 1978 documentary entitled Man Beast, Myth or Monster. In 1992, Byron was once sponsored again by Robert Rines to form the Bigfoot Research Project based near Parkdale, Oregon, in the Hood River region. This was a full-scale monster search, complete with helicopters, infrared sensors, and a 1-800-BIGFOOT phone number. Byron's efforts, which continued until around 1997, did not produce much in the way of good evidence. After this project, Byron was commissioned to investigate sightings of a Bigfoot-type creature in southern Florida, known as the skunk ape. In the 1999 documentary, Sasquatch Odyssey, Peter Byron tells of having used $3 million of other people's money to search for Yeti and Bigfoot during the course of his life. John Napier was a British primatologist, paleoanthropologist, and physician who is notable for his work with Homo habilis, which is a proposed archaic species of Homo sapien which lived roughly between 2.1 and 1.5 million years ago. Napier is also notable for his work on human and primate hands and feet. During his life, he was widely considered a leading authority on primate taxonomy, but is perhaps most famous to the general public for his work on Bigfoot. Napier was one of the first notable scientists to give serious attention to the Bigfoot phenomenon. His investigations included interviewing amateur investigators and purported eyewitnesses. Napier visited alleged Bigfoot sighting areas, studied the physical evidence, and also screened the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film. Napier concluded that the Patterson-Gimlin film was a clever hoax. Napier stated, "The scientific evidence taken collectively points to a hoax of some kind. However, by the same token, in reference to the Patterson-Gimlin film, Napier did also state on page 89 of his 1973 book entitled Bigfoot, the Yeti and Sasquatch in Myth and Reality, there was nothing in this film which would prove conclusively that this was a hoax." In his 1973 book on the subject, Napier ultimately judged the evidence to be inconclusive. There was not enough hard proof to confirm to Napier that Bigfoot was a real creature. However, Napier did judge the indirect evidence, especially the large footprints, as compelling, intriguing, and enough to avoid dismissing the subject as entirely unworthy of serious study. Jimmy Chilcutt is an award-winning retired fingerprint examiner and crime scene investigator. He has served 9 years in the United States Army. He has well over 26 years of active duty as a police officer and holds a Master Police Officer certification from the state of Texas. He was a trendsetter in the crime lab as he developed unique procedures in developing latent fingerprints that have gained him much respect from several agencies such as FBI, DEA, and the U.S. Customs Service. He teaches the state of Texas Intermediate Crime Scene Investigation Core course at the FBI Conroe Police Department Training Facility in Conroe, Texas. Chilcutt's quest to gain more information out of fingerprints led him to develop a rare expertise in non-human primate prints. He has amassed a collection of about 1,000 non-human primate prints. An opportunity arose in December of 1998 to put his rare knowledge to use. He was at his home, reading a book one evening, barely paying attention to a TV program about Bigfoot. His interest was piqued when he heard the term dermal ridges, a reference to fingerprints. He listened closely as Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Associate Professor of Anatomy at Idaho State University, held a casting of a supposed Bigfoot footprint and pointed to what appeared to be the loops and whorls of prints. Believing he could determine the authenticity of the prints, Chilcutt phoned Meldrum and stated, If there is a Sasquatch, only a handful of people in the world know the difference between a primate and a human print. Meldrum said he was delighted to find someone who could help authenticate his collection of about 100 castings of supposed Bigfoot footprints. A skeptical Chilcutt arrived in Pocatello, Idaho, and began studying the collection. He first examined the casting Meldrum had shown on TV and quickly determined it to be a fake. The toe prints were actually human fingerprints. Meldrum turned him loose on the entire collection. The print ridges on the bottom of 5 castings, which were taken at different times and locations, flowed lengthwise along the foot, unlike human prints, which flow from side to side. He said, "No way do human footprints do that. Never, ever." The skeptic in me had to believe that all the prints were from a same species of animal, Chilcutt said. "I believe that this is an animal in the Pacific Northwest that we have never documented." He now believes that while some Bigfoot casts are fakes, some are the genuine prints of a reclusive animal that is yet to be documented and studied. Bob Titmus was a Bigfoot researcher who spent about half a century tracking and hunting in the Pacific Northwest, from California to Alaska. His field work over several decades in North America's most rugged terrain has convinced him that Bigfoot does indeed exist. His field work was dedicated to establishing this fact. His expertise as an animal tracker is well recognized, and he has undoubtedly had much field experience in tracking and searching for Bigfoot. Titmus served in the United States Marine Corps during World War II, seeing action in the South Pacific. He had what he believes was his first Bigfoot sighting while in uniform, not realizing what he had seen until Bigfoot reports became public in the 1950s. Since then, he has had 2 further sightings and reportedly has tracked the supposed animal dozens of times. He has what is undoubtedly the largest collection of Bigfoot track casts in existence, and he has made most of the track casts that are currently available in Northern California, housed at the Bigfoot Museum in Willow Creek, California. He was also one of the first to recover, for scientific analysis, what he thinks are Bigfoot hair specimens. Bob Titmus is a quiet, modest, and unassuming individual. He has never sought publicity for himself or his activities, preferring to work quietly in the background. He carried out field work, sharing his information freely with any scientist who is interested enough to look at his evidence. Having spent most of his life in the wilderness, Titmus has not pursued writing activities and thus has no publications of his own. He was, however, one of the major sources in John Green's work. John Green and Bob Titmus lived within a few hundred feet of each other in the same town until Titmus's death. Bob's achievements were recognized by the International Society of Cryptozoology, which made him an honorary member in 1987, the first person from the United States to achieve that distinction. One day in the not-too-distant future, the myth of Bigfoot will eventually become an accepted reality. The truth will no longer be misinterpreted when Bigfoot physically walks from the pages of folklore into the reality of modern mankind. Then, and only then, shall Bigfoot be rewritten into the history books as a living, breathing representation of an ancient nomadic lineage of Homo sapien, who has always been walking silently side by side with modern man in the forest.